Mr. Atkinson,
Here.
Mr. LaSalle,
Here.
Mr. Lyman,
Here.
Mr. McElmura,
Here.
Mr. Jessic,
Here.
Mr. Tong.
Here. Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. Do we have anybody who wish to make any changes or other alterations in them? Is there a motion to move or to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes carry. So it looks to me like the next thing would be an agenda analysis. Does anybody have anything that they wish to move or discuss differently or? Hearing nothing, we'll move on. No citizens' comments and no citizens in attendance tonight. Looks like the next item is Public Works Report.
Right, okay, so we've got just a few items here, and I think we'll get through them pretty quick, I hope, unless you guys have much for questions, so we'll shoot for that goal anyway. So if you remember, we did some discussion on site distance before, well, it was at the end of 2018, I think was the last time we talked about site distance. And there were some questions and some things that we wanted to kind of bring back, but we weren't able to get to that until now. And Jason's here, he wants to talk through that a little bit and help just kind of make some clarifications on site distances, because if you remember, there was some, how we measure site distances, there was kind of some questions. So I know you've done some field verification too, and
yeah, spent a lot of time reading the AASHTO book,
which was good for us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead, Jason. Why don't you share?
All right. So the big question that came out of it last time was in the uncontrolled, in the neighborhoods, and we were getting site distances that were way too long for what could possibly work in a neighborhood, even older neighborhoods with big lots. And so after reading back through the AASHTO book quite a bit, I found in, it's chapter 9 in the AASHTO book, where it says, it goes into a lot of time talking about all the different lengths that you want your triangles to be. And then at the end, it says, when a clear sight triangle has legs that correspond to the stopping distances on their respective approaches, an even greater margin of efficient operation is provided. However, since field observations show that motorists slow down to some extent on approaches to uncontrolled intersections, the provision of a clear sight triangle with legs equal to the full stopping sight distance is not essential. So pretty much they lay out this whole sight triangle and then say, but studies show that it's not essential. So that really threw me off on that neighborhood sight triangle that I was originally trying to make fit into what doesn't fit. And I think AASHTO understood that. And I never saw that last sentence earlier. So all this work is kind of thrown away with that last sentence.
But you understand it all better now, right?
Oh, yeah, I have a good understanding of it now. Yeah, very good. Yeah, and then there was also, I had some confusion about where to measure for the controlled intersections, when you're sitting at a stop sign. And what AASHTO says is that the front, normally where people stop is their eyesight about 14 and a half feet from the traveled lane. They actually stop a little closer than that, but AASHTO says 14 and a half to 17.8. Is it 14.4 to 17.8? But I mean, you're not going to measure that. That's where you want to measure that distance from the edge of the traveled lane. So that, I was able to clear that up a lot better.
That's the point where from where they stop until the edge of the street.
Right, so that would be
Right.
where I would measure, I would be 14.5 to 17.8 feet. AASHTO gives that variance from the edge of the traveled lane. That's where I would be back. And that stop sign may be in front of me, it may be behind me, has nothing to do with where that stop sign is. Because people pull up to a stop sign or a stop bar, and then state law allows creep forward from, after you've came to a complete stop, you're allowed to creep up to make sure you have a clear sight triangle and then go. So that's where we would measure that from.
So in the instance of a typical street, especially in a neighborhood where you've got on-street parking, that travel lane isn't the curb line. It'd be offset from the curb line some distance. And, you know, in our neighborhood streets, those are pretty narrow streets anyway. So usually that vehicle is really kind of often, the driver might be sitting on center line, to be quite honest with you, in a lot of the neighborhood streets. So it can vary depending on the street. But I think using a street with shoulders versus curbs is more likely where that distance would be measured from, right? A white line versus a curb line.
Right, yeah, it would be more of either the fog line or where you would think that the fog line would be if there's no fog line painted. You know, we might not even come all the way back to the curb. Because that's not really the traveled lane. The traveled lane is out where you would expect cars to be.
It's also like, and I didn't study the AASHTO standard, but isn't it like 3 feet off of center line where the driver would actually be sitting? Isn't it 3 or 3.5 feet off center line where that, so you measure your 14 feet and then off the center line, you measure 3 feet, right? That's where where one tip of your triangle sits.
Yeah, it's almost, I can't remember if it was 3.5 or if it was right in the middle of that travel lane. It's not the exact, you're right, it's not the exact center. I don't
It's not
remember
center line,
exactly.
it's offset.
Yeah, it is offset, yep.
All right, so we just wanted to circle back on that because it seemed like we were a little uncertain about that, and we're feeling much better about it now. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. If there's no other questions, I'll move on to the project update for a couple of projects, and then take a little more time with that 20-mile-per-hour pilot program update. So the 99E tunnel illumination project, I don't know about you folks, but I use that pretty regularly, and I've yet to see a contractor out there, but I know they come and go from time to time. We've found traffic control devices that are in the morning where they shouldn't be. So I was talking to our construction manager, and he says, well, they're there usually after midnight if they're there at all. But for February and most of March, they're waiting on materials that go into that project. So their schedule doesn't really show them doing much in that area until April. So not a spectacular update other than they are in town. They're mobilized at if you noticed, at 12th and Main Street. That's where their equipment's at. But for the most part, it's had very little impact on the routine driver who's not driving from midnight to 6 a.m. So other than that, I hear it's going just fine. But they've not done much other than I think they actually drilled for the foundation for the electronic reader board, and they maybe, I haven't really taken the effort to try and figure it out, but they've got some conduit work to do behind the behind the barriers there. So, or not guardrail, they've got some, conduit to place behind the barriers. So you'd never see those if you weren't there watching them put them in. So that's the update for the 99E tunnel illumination project. Malala Avenue, the design work on Malala Avenue is coming along really well. We're starting to see where right-of-way impacts are going to impact private property, and where we'll probably need to talk to property owners about additional right-of-way acquisition. A meeting we have tomorrow is on asphalt and what kind of reconstruction work we need to do on Malala. And I heard just a little update from Dana Webb, who said that there's a fair amount of structural concern with that section. So we may be doing more structural excavation along Malala Avenue than planned. If you remember, it goes from Beaver Creek to 213 and carries a fair amount of bus traffic, which is usually the driver for our structural design. And it's kind of a mix mash, as you might imagine, of different reconstructs that have happened over the years. And there's also some remnants of the old County Market Road that runs down Malala Avenue. Even though it's a state highway, that surprised me, but there's some signs of concrete panels in there that we may need to tear out. So we'll learn more about that tomorrow, but we're expecting some pretty big numbers with regard to costs for structural rehab along Malala Avenue. The other thing that we have learned is we had planned for the project to have new signals at Claremont and Gaffney. Traffic analysis also looked, we had provisions in the contract for them to look at signal warrants for First Street. And their suggestion is it meets warrants. So we may be adding a third signal at that intersection as well. It's just money, right? It's just money and project costs. So, but other than that, the project's moving along just fine. I think we're going to end up with buffered bike lane in some locations. So, right, it'll be a safer corridor there. We're trying to figure out, just maybe combining some driveways, maybe moving some driveways just to see if we can't help with that. The driveway at, they're near Rock, the coffee shop by Black Rock, and the driveway between Black Rock Coffee and Wells Fargo, there's a lot of trips right there, actually. A lot of traffic that comes in and out of that driveway. And
John,
so
are those traffic lights at Claremont, Fur, and Gaffney, are those going to be synchronized?
yeah, they'd all be interconnected. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Otherwise, it'd take us 15 minutes to get anywhere.
Yeah, well, preferably not, right? We'd like to move traffic through there,
Yeah.
As well as make it a safe corridor for bikes and peds. So anyway, good progress on that project. Just a quick little update on it.
John, would it be possible to get a sort of a 5-minute graphic presentation when you hit about 80% of what you think is correct?
Yeah, actually, the way this description's written up is open house date, time, and location. So we do expect to have the first project open house where we're going to have some really good graphics on. It's it's kind of a long project, so just trying to see it in a sheet by sheet form is kind of problematic. So we'll probably have more strip maps of that area, and they'll all be available at the open house. So the open house is March 20th from 5 to 7. And we're actually going to hold it in the new property, or the property that we own on First Street. So the operations center, so we'll have it right there in the warehouse. And there's no beer left, but we'll have it open and available with some soft drinks and, I don't know, some snacks of some sort. So 5 to 7. And that's also a city commission night. So I'm sure you're all going to rush back here to get to the city commission meeting, but I'll be doing that. So just know that others will have to cover that for
What
me.
were the times again?
5 to 7 on March 20th. And the First Street property, it's got a big sign on it that says Public Works Operations Complex, I think is what it says on it now. And it's at 13895, I think, is the address. I'm still trying to remember that address. But
And it's on the Fred Meyer side of First Street.
yeah, yep.
John, if you're working off of a grant, what provisions are there for cost overrides?
That's what I'm about to.
So any cost overrides that exceed the cost of the grant, right? So the grant was only really covering about 50% of the project. The rest of it was city match. So cost overruns the city will have to absorb those.
So in order to build the extra signal, you don't have to remove something else from the project. You're just adding cost to the project. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't anticipate us removing much from this project because the project is really, if you remember, the project wasn't a wholesale replacement. It was, I mean, a lot of the stuff on the, what I call the business side or the Fred Meyer side of the street, there wasn't a lot of sidewalk replacements. I mean, we were going to do some driveway improvements, and obviously at the intersections, we're going to do a lot of work there, but most of the work's going to happen on the other side, which is kind of the residential side. And it's going to be wider sidewalks pretty much throughout and street lighting, right? But it's not like there's that many frills really on this project. And it's really just a project of kind of mass. For us, it's pretty massive from one end to the other. So you start adding in things like pavement reconstruction or complete road section reconstruction, that adds up pretty quick. You know, signalization, we'll get some economies in the fact that we're doing 3 kind of real close to one another. That, you know, from a construction bid perspective will be helpful, but it's still an added cost. So yeah, we'll have to figure out how much of that we can absorb. And if we can't, it may be that we, you know, build the conduits and the foundation and don't install the signal right now. Wait, you know, but I'm hoping we get all of that done.
You mentioned you're going to be adding the water line, or not adding, but making improvements to the water line. Would that occur before this project starts? And that will be out of the way?
Right,
Or that's going to be concurrent with the...
That'll be the first thing that we do is the water line. Any underground utility work that we need to do.
No, but is that something the city's going to do themselves, or you contract that work, or that one contractor do both water line work and the street improvements, or you were thinking, you mentioned maybe doing that earlier ahead of that project, or that will be concurrent?
I think we'll use the same bid package. It'll just be, so the same contractor.
Okay.
You may have subcontractors that do that kind of work, but we would do it under one contract. All the water line work, street work, in, one contract.
How much input will you have for like driveway access and that sort of thing along Malala? Because like you said, it's kind of the Wild West in parts of Malala there in terms of where driveways are and aren't, you know?
Yeah, well, and with the addition of the First Street signal, the one section that we were kind of struggling with was between Garden Meadow and Gaffney Lane. I don't know if you know that section, but
Yes.
there's probably more driveway approach than curb along there.
Yeah.
And trying to combine those such that it works for all the businesses, but also works for a new signal there. What we didn't want to create was a 4-way intersection at First Street, if you know what I mean, across, because there's really not enough room for even a receiving lane on kind of the business side. But trying to figure out how to make that work between the bank and what is it, the little market there, if you're thinking about types of businesses along there. That most of their driveways are already crossed, so we're just kind of working with them in a way. It may require some parking lot restriping and reconfiguration, but that's kind of what the project team, that's one of the tough spots the project team has.
Since the bike lane's currently and before the right turn pockets, I don't know if there's a plan to extend the bike lanes to the actual intersection. So like when I'm biking, I have to basically take over the whole right lane, and motorists don't understand whether I'm supposed to be turning there or going straight. I'm going straight because I'm basically continuing the bike lane. Mm-hmm. So hopefully the designs will show that cyclists can continue through the intersections. And I'll look at the designs when it comes out. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. And I think one piece that'll probably surprise some folks is right now there's a bit of a pocket on Gaffney and right in front of Burgerville that we are going to eliminate just partly because of that problem, trying to make that, and it's not really that necessary as well. The one at Claremont, we're still thinking will exist, but the idea would be to make it wide enough and such that the bike lane would go through and the right turn folks would turn into a pocket that would be, closer to the curb.
That makes sense. Cool.
Yep.
So go back. What are you doing there at Gaffney?
at Gaffney, so if you're heading towards the college on Malone.
Right.
At Gaffney right now, there's like a very short little
Turn lane.
turn lane, right turn lane.
I know, I just got ticketed for that.
I can't guarantee this will solve your ticket problem, but our intent is to eliminate that little turn pocket there and just keep, so if you're wanting to make a right turn onto Gaffney.
You
at that
just stay
point,
in the straight.
You just stay in the through lane. Right?
Oh.
And you turn. So, there's a possibility for one or maybe two cars to squeeze around the traffic right now, but when doing that, they really kind of create problems for any bicyclists that are trying to be in that through lane. And we kind of need that corner anyway, because by the time we build ADA compliant corner right there, with the new signal, we need a little real estate there as well. So it was not only a need for a little more space there, but a recognition that there's not that much need for that turn pocket.
A quick question, John, you mentioned you have some acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
So several parcels, or what's the scope of that?
I think in the scope of work, we had something like 16, what we call right-of-way files, where the right-of-way agent would have to work with 16 different properties to acquire right-of-way, whether it be a foot or 1,000 feet. I don't know, so every project that we touch, or every property that we touch with the project that was going to require more right-of-way, there was a right-of-way file associated with that. And my recollect is we had 16 included in the scope of work. And I heard the other day that number was going to be something less, under 10. Does that make sense? So 10 properties we'll probably be acquiring right-of-way from.
Yeah, so you started the acquisition process for those yet, or not?
No, but we are going to.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the survey's complete. I know that they're still working on kind of rectifying that with the legal descriptions of a lot of these properties. But there's enough completion in the survey that they can move forward with kind of lane configurations, these questions about, is there a bike lane or maybe not a bike lane, but is there a turn lane or not? Where's that curb line really need to be for the new alignment? Where's the signal going to be spotted, and those kind of things that will help tell us what we need on the backside of the property line.
So the people who are going to be subject to the acquisition, you can have a separate meeting for them so they can come in and see what's actually happening with their property.
Right.
Pin it down.
Yep. It'll be, many of them, it'll be one-on-one conversation with the right-of-way agent. Others, kind of like this property between Garden Meadow and Gaffney Lane, those property owners, it might make sense to try to do some group conversations with them to just see how we can better accommodate their needs as well. So yeah, individual property owners, we probably won't spend too much time on that, although sometimes an open house, we find those folks show up, and usually we find a better time at a different time.
If they get special notice, maybe they already know that they're on the list.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yep.
Has TriMet expressed any concerns or anything about the project?
No, TriMet is interested in the project. They're talking about moving their stops, some of their stops, to be better aligned. They typically like to have their bus stops on the far side of an intersection, so that's not the case today. And they also want them near some of the places where pedestrians can safely cross. So that puts them, if you're heading towards the college, it's going to be beyond Claremont, beyond Gaffney, and then maybe beyond Fur. There's a couple of mid-block crosswalks planned down further closer to 213. Well, somewhere between Fur and 213, we had plans for more of a pedestrian activated, flashing beacon kind of a crosswalk. So I think we're going to be able to at least get one of those in.
I assume that the fire department preemption signal will be able to be hooked into the traffic control system?
The fire department signal is gone and won't be coming back.
Okay. Having tried to get out of the post office on occasion, I can see where that can be a bit of a pain.
Well, they got lights, right? Fire trucks. Yeah. Yeah, fire department actually wanted that signal to go away.
then who am I to say?
Yeah, they've removed it. They removed it months ago, so it's no longer there.
Does that mean the one on Fifth Street might go away?
Oh, they want that.
Oh,
Why would they not want
Fifth Street.
a signal like that there?
yeah. By John Adams, between John Adams and Jefferson.
Yeah, I don't remember that signal, but
Nobody knows it's there.
yeah, I don't even think I've seen it operate. But my sense is because they were conditioned to upgrade that signal, and rather than upgrade it, they provided a document with a traffic study and justification to not put it back. We didn't force them to do it. Okay, any more questions on Malala? I had a lot more questions on that one than I anticipated, so. Yeah, good questions.
Well, it just shows you, we don't know nothing here.
All right, so the 20-mile-per-hour pilot program update. Where are we at? Can we do? I got a PowerPoint for this one. So this PowerPoint presentation is something Dana Webb put together for the City Commission, and I just thought we'd bring it forward. So it's titled for the City Commission work session. And Dana did most of the presentation, or all the presentation, so I'm going to try to follow her lead as best I can. But if you recall, you folks have already kind of authorized this idea of implementing a 20-mile-per-hour zone in key areas around town. You actually made a motion and approved that. And we took it to the City Commission with a few streets. I think we had 3 or 4 streets that we were pursuing in Oregon City. And the commission wasn't so excited about it at that time, and I'll kind of go through that. But we proposed a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit back in July. And we heard from the City Commission, not from the TAC, but, does reducing the speed limit really improve safety? So they asked for that kind of information, so we'll share that with you. Is the neighborhood asking for these kinds of facilities, or are we just, as staff, making recommendations for something that maybe the neighborhood doesn't want? Did we do a lot of community outreach on the implementation of this 20-mile-per-hour program? And then how do we evaluate its success? Because we hadn't really shared how we would do that. So, and then just a little bit of background. The state recently authorized cities to be able to implement 20-mile-per-hour zones. Portland is the first, and they've kind of taken that to a whole new level. And we were a little bit, we're really just a little bit concerned about dipping our toe in this water because, for one, it's resources. From Jason's crew's got to get all the signage out there, and then just trying to figure out how effective it really is going to be. If you're in Portland, I think it's just about everywhere now. They want you to be at 20 miles per hour. So we didn't think that was necessary here, but the ORS requires that it be in a residential district, fewer than 2,000 vehicles per day. So that's most of our local neighborhood streets. 85th percentile speeds less than 30 miles per hour. So out of 100 cars, 85 of them have to be doing less than 30. And then traffic control device that indicates presence of pedestrians and bicycles. That could be in signage or in a lot of cases more like sharrows and bike lane legends on the street. So this is what we shared with the commission, which basically says, well, you're likely of a fatality between a pedestrian and a car goes up dramatically based on speed. And so this is just a graphic that Dana took from another presentation, but obviously, I think it's obvious that slower accidents between pedestrians and vehicles at slow speeds seldom result in a fatality. There can still be, pretty severe injuries, but less likely to be a fatality. This is just another indicator of, the amount of reaction time it takes based on different speeds. So these are kind of obvious facts, but we're still just, without providing a lot of in-depth research and studies on the effects of, speeds on accidents and whether or not this program is really going to be effective. We do think it's going to be effective. We don't have a lot of pedestrian incidents in Oregon City at the lower speeds. They're mostly at most of Oregon City's accidents are either at intersections where they're signal controlled or just intersections that aren't signal controlled. So often speed isn't the issue. It's the fact that the, pedestrians at the wrong place at the wrong time. But empirical data that kind of shows, the slower you drive, the less likely you're going to have some real problems. So the other little piece was the commission wanted to make sure the neighborhood was active and interested in requesting the 20-mile-per-hour zone. So, there's a couple things that happen in the Kenema neighborhood. One is the McLaughlin to Kenema Trail. That had a lot of neighborhood activity in it, a lot of neighborhood walks about how to get pedestrians from the promenade, which is right up here on the bluff, into the Kenema neighborhood. And so they're already pretty active. There was also some design work that went into kind of some options for how pedestrians could safely move through that neighborhood. So out of that, both this proposal to do 20-mile-per-hour streets and through what the neighborhood was already interested in seeing in terms of neighborhood calming, they submitted a letter asking that their neighborhood be considered for the 20-mile-per-hour streets. So they made the request. We think it meets the ORS and it's consistent with the adopted McLaughlin-Kenema Trail Plan. So it's pretty obvious in that first slide, we're calling it a pilot project. So we're going to start with the Kenema neighborhood, even though there's other places where we think it would work well also. So we're going to test it there. We also think that the work that ODOT is doing with their tunnel illumination project with the closure of Tumwater kind of helps support this idea of more pedestrian activity. And then, I don't know if you've noticed, but on Center Street, which is kind of not Center Street, on High Street, the piece that we just redid on High Street, I don't know if you noticed the sharrows on that section. We don't have room for bike lanes on High Street, but we did put sharrows in there, and we've got much better demarcation for ped crossings there. And that section of High Street is, at least a portion of it, was designated as the temporary alignment for pedestrian access for this temporary McLaughlin-Kenema Trail until they could do something at Tumwater and South Second. So kind of aligns itself right there. And then the other thing is we think that the pilot project will help us better understand really what it costs to have the signage put up and the markings put down, because they're custom markings. And we'll keep working through that just so we can have kind of a case study.
Does Cheryl actually mean share arrow, as in share the road?
Does it actually mean that? It makes me feel like there's some legal definition. There probably is, but
I've never heard the term before.
Sharrow.
What is it?
A sharrow is, so oftentimes you see them if you drive down High Street right now, you'll see them where there's a bike legend and there's kind of a chevron or stripes that you would typically see on a military
On the
uniform.
pavement?
On the pavement, right.
Okay.
And those are an industry standard marking, pavement marking, that indicates that drivers should be more aware of the fact that they may be sharing the road with bicycles.
How about calling it a shared right-of-way?
Well, I'm not naming these things. We're not changing the industry standard, but they're called sharrows.
Well, I thought somebody asked what it meant, so you just threw that in there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. It is kind of shared right away for sure. And I don't know, Ray, you know something better about that than I do?
I would add that it's more than just communication to the drivers, it's also communication to the bicyclists, because they're usually, if they're installed properly, they communicate to cyclists where to be on the road, like get out of the door zone, where doors open and hit people. And so it's used also for communication to bicyclists to know where to bike.
Yeah. So we, I don't know what we put, we've got like 6 of them on High Street now,
I
right?
think there's almost 10.
Oh, okay.
They're on the bridge, too.
Yeah, they're on the bridge, although those are getting pretty worn, but we've got them on Main Street and we've got quite a few of them around town. So, this is a different symbol that's depicted here, so I'll talk through that a little bit. But so a couple things that are also a requirement of this program, and one is that we mark our speed limit signs to include some kind of a rider, and this is the rider that we've come up with, which is the little sign below the 20-mile-per-hour sign. I don't know if it's going to go below or above. We'll leave that, but we want to be consistent with that. So right now it's shown below, and the only thing I worry a little bit with that is how low that sign can get. Sometimes it can be a problem, so we may want to move it to the top side of the speed limit sign. But it's really a rider that says, hey, you're in a family-friendly route here. And then, so that's the standard that we've come up with and plan to use. And then out of the McLaughlin-Kenema Trail, the designer for that trail system worked through several examples, and this is what we came up with. Instead of the traditional sharrow, in Kenema there's no sidewalks, right? So on High Street, we've got sidewalks, and so the pedestrian can be on the sidewalk, and then, we're forcing the bicyclist out into the travel lane with the vehicles. So that's the typical scenario where you would use a sharrow, right? There isn't a symbol that I know of that's typical for shared drivers, pedestrians, and bicyclists. And that's what we have in Kenema, right? We've got really narrow streets. Most of them don't even have a center line on them. They're maybe 16 feet, probably in some places a little bit less. So besides the signs and besides some illumination, right? So some street lights, use of this symbol here is what we're proposing to use, and making it scalable so that it fits, right? So it won't be too huge and occupy the whole roadway section, but probably more small, and both denote where a pedestrian who's not familiar with the neighborhood, where they should be at, and also that's true for bicyclists as well. And again, it's a message to both the driver and the pedestrian and the bicyclist here. So.
I'm curious whether another symbol to consider is, it's called a Wernhof. It's a Dutch style, it's a play street basically. It has like a soccer player and a cyclist, and it's in this, I can send you a symbol of it. They use that in Netherlands to show basically a low stress play street where cars are guests and not priority on the street. And that may, I don't know if it's used in the US, but that's sort of the same idea, I believe.
Okay.
Once you get this program going, I can anticipate people coming to request that their street be designated 20 miles an hour. Will you have some warrants available to justify those?
Yeah, so one thing I missed on this slide was that we've, so far, only recommended, and we continue to recommend, the family-friendly routes. So if you remember from the transportation system plan, there's a handful of routes that are designated family-friendly. That's the only place where we propose to place this kind of signage. And in Kenema, in the original TSP, for most of Kenema, we're designating as family-friendly. I think 3rd and 4th, Ganong, 5th, and some of the connecting streets there, we're designating that, or they've been designated as family-friendly routes, but not every street, no.
But can Park Place come and say, hey, and write a letter and say, we would like to implement or have city implement 20 mile per hour speed limit in Park Place?
They could. Every one of these streets that we recommend, like we're going to go out, well, our plan now is to go out and do all the work that we need to do with Kenema neighborhood in terms of design, layout, public involvement, those kind of things, make sure we hit all those as well. We still need to bring back to the city commission, and they approved this. I don't recall, and maybe it says later if it's by resolution or by ordinance, but each street needs to be approved by the governing body. So the commission can always say no. And staff will probably would make recommendations based on, does it meet the warrants? Is it a family-friendly route? If it's not a family-friendly route, but we think it should be, then we'd have to go through the process of updating the TSP. So we're feeling pretty bullish about the family-friendly designation because we don't want to be putting this kind of signage and resource out on every street.
But, on contrary, there's a support that you would have less fatalities per se, or injuries if you had 20 miles per hour.
True, but we also need to move traffic efficiently through town. And so it's a balance. It really is a balance, I think. So how do you meet that balance? We're testing it right now. A couple other things that the Kenema neighborhood wanted was stop signs. So we've evaluated these and think that they're justified. So 3rd and Ganong and 4th and Blanchard are 2 locations. And then there may be some areas where we do some unique pavement markings just to kind of take a already pretty narrow corridor and kind of, striped traffic calming devices, if you will. We haven't fully figured that out, but there was some pretty, I would say, creative, maybe a little, not exactly what we would want to have recommended for, that came out of the bike, the pathway study. And it, called for things like, really just making it 1 lane and kind of requiring more of a vehicle to sit in a particular area to yield to the other, as opposed to just allowing them to go side by side near, congested areas. And so we'll look at those options, but we're not sure if we're going to use those right now. So April, we want to go back to the Kenema neighborhood and just kind of work through some outreach with the Kenema neighbors. She listed it as an adoption via ordinance, so it is by ordinance versus resolution, so that'll be coming. So we expect to do some pavement markings in the summer of 2019 in the Kenema neighborhood. And then Jason, that might require some pavement, some in-house paving in that neighborhood too, just to get it straightened up and ready for those. But,
Yep.
And then we'll follow up with them after that. So that's what we shared with the city commission. This time we got support and they gave us the green light to move forward. So that's a little better than we did in June or July of last year.
Is it better marketing job?
Better marketing, yeah, better marketing.
When did you meet with the city commission?
I think
I
it
want
was
to say it was the
12.
last work session. It was the 12th, yeah.
New city commission.
That too. Thank you. I don't have a graphic for the work that we're doing on the quiet zone, but
Sorry.
kind of loud, yeah.
That screen really needs some work.
So quiet zone designation in downtown Oregon City is about railroad and finding a safe solution to some of our crossings so that the railroad doesn't have to blow their horns, whatever it is, the 5 to 7 times when it goes through town. The idea being that if that horn blowing didn't have to happen so regularly, that you may see more proposals for residential development in the downtown, right? So in order to get quiet zone designation, the Federal Rail Administration has some specific rules and guidelines by which you get designated as a quiet zone. And the city city commission's had that as a goal for a while now to get quiet zone designation. And they reinforced that this last go around because it's still on their goals list. And so we've been working with a consultant and the railroad and ODOT Rail. There's ODOT Rail and there's the Federal Rail Administration, and then there's Union Pacific, and then the city as the road authority. So the 2 crossings are at 10th and 11th. There's a pedestrian crossing at 11th. You probably, if you've walked around downtown, you might have seen that. It's actually got a fair amount of use because the folks who live up in the McLaughlin neighborhood, it's steep street, but they use that crossing quite a bit.
Cross there. A lot of commuters using the bus.
Yeah, yeah. So, and it used to be that they'd drive across that crossing years ago. And so, anyway, both those are a bit of a challenge. I would say the crossing at 10th and Main is the biggest challenge because of the type of vehicles that use it. Obviously, there's lots of trucks that use that hillside. And the geometry of that intersection is pretty tight. And I've got some better drawings that will maybe put that on the agenda for me next time. We'll bring you a better drawing of that, schematics, but we met with the rail on site once. We want to do that again. And they call it a diagnostic meeting. So we get out there, we all kick the dirt and look at the intersection and look at some of the concerns. And between the rail administration, ODOT Rail, and Union Pacific, they all take stabs at figuring out how much improvement we really need there. And I think this one's moving to a pretty high standard. It would, if you've been around the metro area at all, lots of times you'll see just a 2-gate system, and other places you'll see a 4-quadrant gate system where there's gates that cross all 4 lanes of a basically a 2-lane system. So as you enter, there'd be a gate, and on that same lane on the other side of the track, there'd be another gate. And then and you come in the opposite direction, same thing, a gate before you get to the tracks and a gate after you get to the tracks. And that may seem a little bit, well, you just kind of wonder, but why you would need so much crossing protection. But there's been enough accidents to show that people try and beat the tracks or beat the train and to get around the tracks. So they go around the gate. And there's been lots of documented cases of that where people have just, decided they're going to beat the train. They can see it down there just fine, and they'll go around the tracks. So I think that's what's going to be required there at that location. And in the process, we'll have to fix the sidewalks. It's kind of a tough place for ADA accessibility because I think Singer Hill's about, 14-15% through there, and the sidewalk's really steep. So trying to figure out how to make that work in a way that the railroad would be happy with, so we expect some design work out of that, try and get confirmation in the field through those agencies, and then move forward with a a detailed project cost estimate and figure out how to fund that thing, because I think it's going to be pretty expensive, just given the location. And the minute we touch that signalization there, it's not a lot different than us or ODOT. You start touching an intersection like that, and then they say, well, it's time to upgrade all that, so you got to buy new equipment. And so
Redirect the ADA access over to the elevator, because the road up there doesn't meet standards for the sidewalk anyway.
yeah, some have suggested that. I think the railroad acknowledges that people still use it, and they still.
Well, yeah, but ADA is different than PED.
Right. But they're, based on some of the lawsuits that have come out of through the state now, ODOT Rail in particular is pretty sensitive to that, to making sure everything approaching it and leaving it meets ADA access. And the only way to really do that is to find a way to transition. You got to take it enough distance to be able to make that transition happen. So, yeah, we'll probably be looking at kind of a switchback scenario there. And that's also kind of the configuration that they like for just pedestrian warning. If you're walking on flat ground and you're coming down a sidewalk, they don't just put a gate there or a light there. Now they want you to stop, read some signage, turn 90 degrees, and do a little U-turn, do a little chicane, if you will, with lots of signage that says, hey, look out for train access. And so it'll be something like that.
Have you guys looked at eliminating that thing altogether and rerouting traffic differently?
You mean 10th?
Yeah.
Well, the railroad would love that, but there's not really any place to put, we don't have that many crossings across the tracks.
But routing it down, I mean, you have some other crossings and just using those main.
It's huge. I mean, it's pretty heavily used.
Well, I know.
I think we have probably 15,000 vehicles a day come up and down that hill.
Really, what we've got is, we've got 10th Street, we've got the stairs at the elevator and the elevator, and then you've got South 2nd Street going that way. You've got 11th Street, and then 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th are undercrossings, and 17th is closed to everybody, theoretically.
All right. Yeah, there's just, I think we as a city need to preserve every crossing we have at this point. I don't know if you ever use, what's the Google Maps or whatever in the morning where you can look at congestion. I think, Henry, it was you that said, this city really, the biggest problems are between this upper level and the lower level. 15th, 14th, Singer Hill, in the mornings, those are all.
Well, I mean, I drop my kids at Holcomb in the morning and then typically go through the town to get in McLaughlin and then head in town. I mean, it can be congested. Sometimes it backs up to the county offices. But that was just, I don't know. I just thought, or maybe doing undercrossing, that way it kind of eliminates the need for all the ramps and you can move faster.
Be careful, it'll take me back to the discussion of how many bridges we've got across the river and where they're located.
That's the update for the quiet zone. Any questions, more questions about that? Just a quick update on the Clackamas County is moving forward with their vehicle registration fee, and they had the first reading of the ordinance to enact the vehicle registration fee on February 7th. And I meant to write down the next day, I think it's February 27th is their next public hearing on that. And I suspect they're gonna also read the ordinance a second time. And I understand the vehicle registration fee, which is in their ordinance, is established at $30 per vehicle every 2 years. So it's essentially $15 a year per vehicle, but you only go get it every other year, right? So that's the, I think it's effective 90 days after their enactment. So end of February, June, that would be effective. So get your vehicles registered early if you have to, I guess. I don't know.
Is bicycles
you did
included
good
as a
thing.
vehicle?
Bicycles. I should know that.
I assume it's not. I just want to clarify because
Yeah, I don't believe so. No, motorcycles. I don't think
Bicycles aren't licensed.
commercial is in there, but
I just know under state law that they're considered vehicles. It's just not. There's no
yeah,
fee for them.
but that would require a full registration program, which we don't have now, so no.
Yeah.
And how much of that $15 or $30 comes to City of Oregon City? 50 cents, 10 cents?
No, 40%.
Oh, 40%.
So 40% I mean, the legislature set that up years ago, so they're complying with that requirement. So whatever they collect, 40% of it comes to the cities minus their collection administrative fee. So the county and the state collect that. And then whatever that costs for them to administer that, 40% of that comes to us. 10% goes to a fund that they're really kind of earmarking for jurisdictional road transfers inside the county. So there's like a lot of county roads inside Oregon City, Abernathy, South End Hill, Leland. We've got quite a few actually in town that I think both the city and county would like to have jurisdictionally transferred, but there's usually a liability associated with them or they're in pretty bad condition. So this will help with that. And then the remainder, the other 50% goes to the county for their maintenance and road project needs.
So we ought to get about $1.50 out of every car.
Well, the car is registered from the Oregon City, right?
Right.
Within the city proper, you'll get 40% of those registration fees.
Minus the handling fee.
Yeah, no, I don't expect that. I think actually our estimated, they're basing it on population. So they collect what they collect and then they distribute using kind of the population estimates that come out of the.
Shoot, they got the address, why can't they do it on addresses?
I don't know. They're basing it on population. That's kind of the way the ordinance was written. And it results in, I want to say the first year estimate of $690,000 for Oregon City. So it's not a small piece. So I think it's good for, those folks like us who are pretty interested in implementing a TSP that has some gaps in funding. We'll be able to see that money dedicated to those. That's what I'm advocating for.
Does it go to maintenance or can it go to capital improvements?
Yeah, it's just similar to our gas tax. As long as it's used for transportation maintenance functions, it can go to that. In Oregon City, that's maintenance or sidewalks or bike lanes or roadways, roundabouts maybe. Okay, anything else? That's all I have.
You don't have to feel bad about it.
I don't really, just trying to show a little compassion.
Do you have any information about plans for the neighbors' night out? We were talking about that in the past in relation to what the police department's plans were.
So I did hear from the police department that they are going to do National Night Out. They want it to be a little bit more community driven from the perspective of groups like ours, the neighborhood associations, the city departments, a little bit less about kind of vendors and folks trying to sell insurance and things like that. So they're moving it this year to the end of the Oregon Trail. And I think that's because they're going to be doing their thing up at the Mount Pleasant site And so it is going to happen. I don't recall the date. And we are going to have to kind of put our heads back into the idea of what does that mean for us? So we probably ought to schedule a meeting and figure out, it'd be nice to have the CIC and you guys did your committee work on trying to think about ways. And I think we talked a little bit about that. So we kind of have to resurrect those notes because I've forgotten some of that stuff. So yeah, that's a good point. We'll get back to that.
And you'll get back to us when you have an idea as to what it is you want us to do
Yeah,
before the event.
that's right.
Well, some of the stuff that we brought up on that subcommittee, excuse me, we'll take a little advance,
Pre-planning,
well, yeah.
Just massaging the stuff that's out there.
You know, it's
Yeah.
not something that can just be put together in 2 weeks and be there at the Oregon City, or the end of the Oregon City Trail. Yeah.
Yeah, but we can, Vance is dying to do it, I can tell already.
I am. I actually have a meeting tomorrow with the chief of police and two of the captains, and I'd be happy to broach the subject with them and maybe plant that bug in their ear that we need to sit down with them and figure out kind of what their wants and desires are,
Yeah.
and be able to relay that back to you.
Sounds like a good plan.
so are we ready to move into communications? Or or is there more of the
I'm done.
clerk's report?
I'm done. You guys have anything else?
Well then, any communications? Having here none. Future agenda items? I should like to point out I've got one. If anybody else has anything, please speak now.
I don't know if it's ready for agenda item, but I'm working on a rural shuttle to get people from rural Clackamas County to Oregon City. And I'm applying for grants to do that. I don't know if it's at a stage to discuss it here, but I just wanted to throw it out there that I'm working on that at the college.
And you'll be able to tell us about it when it's more of a presentable item?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? I have a question that is of relatively low priority, I think, but having all this rain reminded me of the floods that we've had in the past and how and where the water collected. And I'm wondering if we have any sort of a plan on the shelf anywhere that we can pick up and point out and say, here's what needs to happen when the water gets up to Tony's Fish Market and nobody can get out. And now that we've made a water trap under 213, how do the people from Clackamas River Drive area get into town?
Okay. Yeah, we do have a natural hazards mitigation plan. So I can pull that out and see how prescriptive it is, but I suspect it's not what you're talking about.
Because I kind of foresee, having remembered that the police had lost a car down there in front of the old service station where they sell Honda products now.
Where's that?
On Main Street, down by the connection to the train
Oh,
station.
Stark Street,
Oh,
Lawn
okay.
Garden, some of
Yeah,
that.
yeah, they, during the last flood, one of the officers tried to drive a squad car through there and they had to rescue him off the top of the car. And considering that only connection to the Park Place area that doesn't flood now is under 213, I can see there being a bit of a problem.
I mean,
Getting that part of town connected to the rest of town when we get a flood.
aside from Carver, you mean?
Yeah, aside from going to Carver or Holly Lane, if you can get to it. Because as I remember, the intersection at Redland Road is flooded. And it goes up to Holly, the floodplain goes up to the connection at Holly Lane to Redland Road. Is where I remember the water going, so.
Is there even like, there's no markings anywhere, right? There's no,
No.
says this is.
There's no signage or anything.
Safe route.
No safe route, there's no nothing.
No.
But before before they made the jug handle, you could go across and come in. You could get 213 and you could go up to Anchor Way and come into town. Now with the jug handle like it is, you gotta go down to 205 in order to get into town.
Yeah, you'd have to get on to 213 and 205.
Yeah. So that's the reason for the question, is are we prepared when that happens? And like I said, I know it's a low priority, because it ain't gonna happen until next year at least.
You don't think it's gonna happen this year?
So that's all I have.
It's a 1% chance any given year that could happen, so,
Yeah, but if you do the statistics correctly,
yeah.
every storm that is of magnitude to cause a problem is a 1% storm. And you add those, so you get a 100-year flood about once every 30 years. And we've had them, I can remember 4 of them in the last 50.
Well, shouldn't we look at it as, what's the likelihood? And then what's the risk? Likelihood is not likely. And what's the risk? Low risk.
Unless you want to get to the hospital.
Well, you gotta face it, when something like that happens, there's nothing you can do about it anyway. Everything's gonna be all messed up, no matter how many plans you put in place, so. What are you gonna do?
Well, like I said, we have a natural hazard mitigation plan, and I think, we can, you're right, things have changed at Washington and 213. And maybe there's something that we need to do there, but I mean, we know that we got flooding at 15th and 14th near Tony's Fish Market. We're not gonna change that.
No.
We got flooding that happens along along the Willamette River front. It goes all the way to the, my bigger concern right now is, we put 240 apartments at Main Street Extension, right? That area is probably gonna flood first, right? That roundabout's gonna be underwater.
That roundabout's going to be underwater, and they're going to be probably within 6 inches of the floor line, because there was a foot inside the wagon train the last time it happened.
So, we're susceptible to flooding. It's really just kind of making sure that, tenants know and manage your apartments like that hey, there's only a couple ways out of here, or stay in your apartment on the 3rd floor.
Fill your pantries.
Right.
And that's our regional center.
That's a big topic, Henry, but we'll try to get back to you.
Yeah, and like I said, it's probably one where we say, stock up and be prepared to stay there for a while.
Okay.
Anything else? I'm going to move, I want to hear a move for adjournment.
Move we adjourn.
Second, anybody?
Second.
We're adjourned.